Hey everybody, welcome to 3D6 Charge, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k, the state of the game and community news. We're streaming live at Twitch/3D6 Charge every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, except for tonight, where you can follow and subscribe. We're also anywhere you can find podcasts like Spotify or iTunes. This is episode 49, Standardized Terrain Layouts. I'm your host, Chris Vo, and joining me today is Kevin Lieb.
Howdy, howdy.
And Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hey everyone.
All right, so you guys got any what's going on, guys? What's new since we last spoke?
So I had an AOS 3.0 demo / come and learn day at my place today.
And
I was there.
Kevin, you're also you're a little quiet.
Oh no. Is that better?
Yeah, it's better. So yeah, you hosted this at your condo?
Yep.
Making good use of that that big walkout basement space you got there.
Mm-hmm.
How many tables were you able to fit in there?
I think I could fit 4 tables if we wanted to be packed. I think I could actually host an RTT in the basement.
Oh yeah, easily.
An 8-player RTT?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should do a 3D6 Charge Invitational.
Ooh.
The only problem is I have some parking spots for like 4 cars, and I could probably fit like up to 6. But I probably would need some people to kind of show up in like
Carpool.
Carpool.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could probably make...
Also, I would need 2 more tables of terrain.
I mean, I've got a table of terrain, and I also just bought a 3D printer this past weekend, so...
Ooh.
I don't know how. So it's a resin 3D printer, not one of like the filament ones. And I think the filament ones are supposed to be better for terrain because it's got like the bigger like build plate. But I think I can make a resin printer work for terrain at the very least. But yeah, I'm still experimenting with it. Actually, still building out a spot in my basement where I can like close it off and vent it to the outside world because resin is bad for you. But I also played in a tournament this past weekend too.
Ooh, how'd it go? Did you dodge the Tau matchup?
I did dodge the Tau matchup. I did not dodge Admech, but Admech was actually my only win of the day.
Good job.
Yeah.
Hey, you've broken the mold. Most people don't do that against Admech. What was your Admech opponent playing?
It was Gilfer, a local guy. He was just playing like the meta like Lucius Scutari like bombs. And I think a decent part of what gave me the edge over the Lucius Scutari was actually the terrain layout. The terrain layout at this RTT was modeled on the like standardized layout that was on Warhammer Community, the one that Mike Brandt developed, and that what I'm assuming is going to be the Nova standard setup, like for this next Nova major. But we'll get into the terrain thing later because that's going to be like the overall topic of tonight. Just a quick recap of the rest of my term results. Round 1 was a win against Admech. We only went to round 4, and I ended up getting like 65-ish points or something like that, mid-60s. My second round was against a pure Deathwing army. And for the record, I was running a Terminator heavy Death Guard force, so it was just like 2 very, very slow freight trains moving towards each other. The Death Guard ended up winning 100 to 87, mainly because it was the mission where, so I think it was Sweep and Clear, where the mission primary is the one where, hold the one in your deployment zone. And you get 3
Death Guard won, but your opponent won?
Yes, I'm saying Deathwing won, sorry.
Oh, Deathwing won, okay.
Yeah. Deathwing won. So it was it was basically... The primaries he took were secondaries he took were Oaths of Moment from the Space Marines book, Stubborn Defiance from the Dark Angels supplement, and then the Mission secondary.
And then kept
which-
them all, and they held every objective.
Yeah, so he was able to max out two secondaries for the mission and for Dark Angels by just sitting on his home objective the whole game. And then Oaths of Moment is pretty easy to score if you're Deathwing. So so even though I scored really high, I scored 87, and that's usually a winning score. He was just able to max out those secondaries really easy peasy, just because it just stars aligned on that one. And then third round was an Imperium army. It was mixed Iron Hand Successors and Imperial Guard. And then, since I already had like
that's a choice.
It was definitely a choice. And
was he doing this for like the Mega Dreadnought?
No, it wasn't even a Mega Dreadnought. It was just a Volkite Contemptor.
Oh, I mean, that's a Mega Dreadnought, a character Contemptor.
Yeah, a character Contemptor.
That's a reasonable thing to bring Iron Hands for.
Yeah. So he made a Iron Hand Successor Contemptor with Volkites, made it a character so I couldn't target it, and then brought a shitload of Blade Guard because he took the Hungry for Battle and Whirlwind of Rage thing. So
I've heard of this. I forget which podcast where someone was talking about that.
It actually worked out really well. So initially going into it, since I was playing Death Guard, I just was not worried about Blade Guard at all, because why would I be? It's just 1 damage now. Felt like a lot of that threat had been mitigated. Did not anticipate the calculus on Hunger for Battle and Whirlwind of Rage. Like those 6s exploding, 6s exploding is nice, but in small amounts it can't really add too much. But when you bring like, I think had like 15 Blade Guard, all of them just dumping out attacks, those 6s are gonna explode quite a bit, and I'm gonna fail saves. When you're playing a Terminator heavy list, and you're just trying to dodge ones, you're gonna fail something eventually. So it worked out for him. And then it was the same story with 3 Lehman Russ tank commanders with Demolisher cannons. Same idea where he's just spitting out attacks and just forcing you to make saves. And I also misplayed like a lot over the weekend, so that attributed to yeah. So but it was fun.
It's interesting. You would think that you could at least splash, like, even if you're willing to give up your super doctrine, because let's be honest, most of the not heavy Devastator doctrine, super doctrines are kind of worthless because you can kind of hide from them.
Yeah, you in them for turn 1.
You would still feel like getting access to combat doctrines would be worthwhile. You could find like some chapter to combo with. Like, I would not be surprised if you were to mix and match this with like the Ultramarines Dreadnought thing, where you're like putting Dreadnoughts forward and having a rather unkillable but high DACA army would be better. Because I feel like Ultramarine Dreadnoughts and Infiltrated Warsuits would just be better than the Lehman Russes.
I would imagine so. But I after I talked to the guy, and he's like, yeah, I just honestly did not have he hasn't bought a lot of models since 9th edition, and this is basically like his old 8th edition army. So he kind of just kept rolling with it.
Where do you find 15? You don't just find 15 Blade Guard veterans. That just doesn't. Those ones just fall out of the sky. They're not assault interceptors.
The other thing I just want to say real quick before we move too far past it is that Iron Hands actually really likes their Devastator Doctrine thing, because unlike the other Devastator Doctrine army, Virile Fist, they for a command point can point in the unit and just put it in the Devastator Doctrine, and then their Devastator Doctrine is like +1 armor penetration and reroll 1s to hit. Sometimes on units that don't normally get access to rerolls in the new edition. Oh, that's an interesting list. It's doing some stuff. I do see how your matchup into it would probably be real bad, because it's just like a bunch of high strength, higher penetration, multi-damage guns in the Death Guard, and you're just like kind of falling apart.
Yeah, so I was basically facing up against 3 Demolisher cannons, a Volkite Contemptor, and then just like a buttload of a buttload of blade guard, and then he also had like a couple of like chimeras with like multi lasers on them just to cart around his other his loyal 32 basically. But I mean, he used the chimeras effectively. He basically just got to an objective, dumped his guys out, and then just used them to move block basically, which is the way you should be doing with chimeras, I think. Yeah.
Surprised that he gave up the doctrine. Like, I don't know. I think you're right. The Devastator Doctrine is good. It's just not good with that trait combination.
Yeah, he's not interested like in the Devastator Doctrine, right? He wants like AP3 is enough most of the time on those Blade Guard vets who are freaking killable because they don't have the Iron Hand 6 of Feel No Pain because it's a successor, but you can still just spend a command point to give them a 5 of Feel No Pain.
Yep.
Because that stratagem should probably only go to a 6 up if you're not mainline Iron Hands, but it doesn't. It's like so abusive with successor chapters and Iron Hands. And then that Dreadnought is to blow away Raiders and Jakari bodies who don't care about armor penetration anyway. So
yeah, actually, I don't think I saw any. No, I don't think anybody was playing Dark Eldar.
Must be nice. That's not been my experience at RTTs.
I think there were 4 AdMech armies though, out of like I think 20 guys. Which
were they all Skitarii spam?
Yeah.
When you say Skitarii spam, how many Skitarii?
I mean, like my matchup had 50 Skitarii. So,
Skitarii light spam.
Yeah.
It still probably felt like spam. Still probably felt like it was taking up half the board, right?
Until I shot them all, but yeah.
Yeah, they do kind of fall apart to Death Guard bolters.
No, not even Death Guard bolter. Well, yeah. Especially when I can. I was playing Inexorable, so I can like stack on like AP1, which ups the output of bolters against Skitarii tremendously.
He was Lucius, right? So he's like he's like getting +1 on saves, and like was he like making unit immune to armor penetration and stuff like that? Or?
Basically, yeah. So I mean, like if he was out in the open, what is it? It's just +1 to save against damage 1, right?
+1 save against damage 1, but there's also the Doctrina for another +1 saves, and then you can put it in cover. You can ignore AP 1 and 2. So like basically, he should always be on 2-ups with the unit. There's like one unit that should just always be making 2-up saves against.
Yeah, there was one unit of Skitarii where they were only behind like I think dense cover, and they were like more or less out of the open, and the AP1 did do something. There wasn't like he wasn't ignoring AP1 and 2. So the AP1 did have an effect, even if that was just basically taking away their chapter tactic or Forge World tactic, whatever. So it did something. That I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with AdMech rules to say what parts of it didn't do a thing, but.
Shall we talk a bit about the new terrain?
Yeah. So terrain, Mike Brandt, I don't know what his title is at GW now, but
event packet organizer. I don't know what he does.
Event dude.
Tournament liaison. I don't know his title.
He's the guy that runs the Nova Open. And towards like probably like midway through 8th, the Nova standardized terrain layout kind of became like the de facto layout for competitive Warhammer in 8th edition, where you got the 2 big L's in the middle of the board blocking line of sight. So with the GW events being announced, like can't remember, what was it, like New Orleans and somewhere else, Vegas? No, not Vegas. Orlando, I think. Basically, they really standardized terrain layouts. They're more or less like 4 big ruins in the middle of the table. Orlando and Austin. Thank you, chat. 4 big ruins in the middle of the table. 4 medium ruins throughout other parts. Two medium ruins in the like more or less the center of the table. Then they're all just have the standard ruin rules, light cover, defensible, scalable, breachable, upscaling.
On screen?
Yeah, I can bring it up on screen. Let me find it. And then around the edges of it are some dense and difficult terrain.
So
So
that's the official GW article, and then that is the one with it with the objectives on top of it. Just probably open up the second one.
yeah, let me open that up right now.
So there's several terrain setups, right? There's like they said there's multiple that
There's
like.
two,
Is it-
but the
is
way
it just-
they've done them, it's not really two. They'll play very similarly.
Very
opinion.
similarly.
My only concern with some so one there is some difference between 1 and 2, but 2 specifically, table setup 2. Can we talk about that one first?
Yeah, so
So table setup 2. For those of you who are just listening, there's 4 very large runes in more or less the center of each table corner. They're a little off center, but it's pretty close. And then they have 2 medium ruins, almost but not quite end to end in between them. Which basically makes it so that, and then every single one of these things are obscuring. And then there's 4 small ruins, basically the cardinal points of a compass, that are
they're basically dense. They're forests, more or less.
yeah, they're forests. They also don't do anything because they're like in the corner of the table, or like the very back edge of the table. Maybe some artillery could go in there, but your artillery is probably like hiding behind one of their huge obscuring terrain pieces. Basically, this is just making shooting even less relevant. I am concerned that this is the sort of terrain that Dark Eldar armies get to look at and just be like, I can't lose games on this, because you could literally deploy your army. There's like multiple deployment zones you could get where you could put your entire army out of line of sight. Like
Yeah,
literally your entire
so
army.
basically the way that this terrain is set up is that you basically can't shoot from table edge to the opposite table edge anywhere along the table unless there's like you're shooting over the dense cover.
Until a model gets halfway across the table, it actually can't see into the other half.
Yeah.
I think this is terrible. I really think this is terrible. Yes, you want to have terrain, but this isn't like interesting terrain. This is terrain that makes it so that like you just can't see across the table. Like MSU super mobile armies just get to have a field day with this, and that's if those armies were doing bad, you could certainly make an argument for that. But like that's the sort of army that's good right now. Like that, those are the armies that are doing very well, with the exception of AdMech, which is just stupid. But
let's put it this way: if I was going to an RTT where I knew that every table was like terrain set up too, with the 2 medium runes in the center, and basically there's no line of sight anywhere, I would just bring as many Khorne Berserkers or Repentia as I could, just because or like Orc Boys, like Sluggo Boys.
Yeah, so I'm playing Tau right now in RTTs, but I'm certainly looking at playing Sisters competitively. Like, looking at these tables, like these tables are unbelievably good for Sisters, because I just get to like hide behind terrain until I want to run out and start shooting multi-meltas at things, and like you just always get to trade. Like you're never going to get punched back until you want to run out. The units with the longest threat ranges are just the best units. Maybe I'm being overly negative, but I do not like table setup 2 like at all.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. It's really the 2.
Vindication.
It's the 2 ruins in the center.
It's the ruins in the center. Yeah.
If they were just dense instead of obscuring, I think that would be fine. You can shoot over them, but you're going to suffer a penalty to hit. That means that the terrain's going to, and the center is going to do something, but it's not going to outright just shit all over anybody who wants to play a shooting army. I
have played on terrain setup 2 with more or less with the 2 center things being like dense forests instead of obscuring terrain, and it feels good. Like things can hide. Things can hide in buildings that come out and make like reasonable melee charges, but like shooting armies still get to like play the game. And I mean, there's like not really like quote unquote shooting armies right now. Like everything's sort of mixed shooting and fighting.
Well, let's look at this objective layout for everyone's favorite mission, the Scouring. If you play this mission, you can very easily, if you go up like along the side of the long edge of the board, you can control 2 objectives and not be able to get shot at until they come onto that half of the board.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because deployment zones, right, are the long edges, right? Yeah, you can literally just like sit on your 2 objectives and not be able to get shot at.
No, I think it's these like small squares, in the boxes in the middle. But like, you can just stack everything on one side and just make that your plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just come around the side and you're not.
Yeah, and it's honestly not a bad plan. With mission. Actually, no, this is a table one where it actually works. But again, like even if you look at like retrieval, where you're going the long ways and there's 6 objectives.
Yes,
you can easily just hide and hold objectives.
For sure. Yeah, and I think most shooting armies are just going to go from like, I can't see my opponent to I'm in melee combat now, and there's no like, oh, I get a turn to shoot or anything. It's just like, wham! Like I'm in melee.
Yeah. Oh, let's also not forget a priority target where you can move, where each one of these quarter objectives can get moved 6 inches, and you can very easily again set it up where you can hold 2 and not be seen at all.
Yeah, because look at like our AdMech is sort of an aberration because the army is so unbelievably pushed that like it's not just like points need to get changed, like rules need to get changed. So let's not worry about AdMech right now. Let's worry about like our boogeyman armies, which are Sisters of Battle, Drakari. Do we have a third one right now?
I mean, technically AdMech.
Sure. Well, we could talk a little bit about AdMech. But like both Sisters of Battle and Drakari, right?
Let's say
like,
White Scars.
Sure. White Scars, I think, will also be like insane in these tables because all 3 of those armies can go from I'm like completely safe from my opponent shooting to I'm in melee combat with my opponent's army. Most of these objectives are in a place where you can completely hide from your opponent and still be within charge range of another objective.
Yeah. Chat's asking if those 2 pieces in the center were armored containers, would that feel better for you guys?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would, because it's not
it's like
obscure.
Dense. Yeah, like something that's like dense and breachable. Like, yeah.
No, even armored containers. They're basically just hills. But even that would feel better because like it would be true line of sight, not obscuring line of sight.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want them to be hills just because that's probably too much swinging the other way where like now melee armies have to like climb over a bunch of stuff to get to you. But like forests, so like shooting armies are penalized to shoot through them, but like
and movement is penalized at -2 inches.
Or if there's just one, like if there's just like one smaller one, but like as it is, there's like a nearly unbroken line traveling across the table that you just like cannot see through. Like, and that's not good. I recognize that like Tau Gunline is not like an army that we should be aiming to make playable, but like holy crap, like if you never play on the street, it just doesn't do anything. I have indirect fire, but I don't have the indirect fire to like play the entire game with indirect fire, and you're playing the entire game with indirect fire on these tables.
Yeah.
Quick side note. Let's be glad that you don't have enough indirect fire to just play the game with indirect fire.
Right. I should not be able to. Super fair. All right. And then you go to things like, and you look at things like raiders that can move 14 inches and then shoot and have everything in them shoot and then move 7 inches after they shoot. Like things are like hypermobile like that could just like completely take over games because raiders are going to be untouchable. Like Dark Elder are going to get to multiple turns where every turn they get to look at the table and they go, do I want for my opponent and myself to be able to do damage to each other this turn, or do I want to just be like, let's hold some objectives and then say go, and they get to be the one who makes the decision like every turn, because your opponent literally can't shoot across the table. I've said this so many times, I feel like I'm just like repeating myself now, but I think
the interesting is if you read the Warhammer community article about it, like, and you read the section on balance, they straight up say like too much obscuring terrain makes it too easy for close combat oriented armies to cross the board unencumbered. Yes, that's absolutely true.
Okay.
So why is it
agree.
like this?
Like, because if you look at it, there's like you could just like draw a line across the table, right? And only at very specific angles can you see past that line. And if you just like don't put your models in those angles, then your models can't be seen. Like, okay. Like immobile shooting armies shouldn't be good, but immobile shooting units should be able to exist inside of a larger army. And if I know that I'm going to a tournament where the setup looks like this, like I'm never bringing a unit that can shoot further than 18 inches because I don't want to spend for those points on those 6 inches that literally will never matter. I don't think there's a place you can stand a model that it could shoot more than 18 inches other than like maybe in a corner shooting at something that doesn't matter.
Yeah. So in reading this article, I just want to bring something up real quick. So these centerpieces, these medium ruins. So they say that like the big, large ruins, they're supposed to be, you know, like true line of sight blocking pieces. You know, they're supposed to be have like boarded up windows, not a lot of things that you can see through. So if you're on the terrain piece, then you shouldn't really be able to see through it. But on the centerpieces, they're supposed to be quite porous, where the second you touch it, basically the cover evaporates.
They want the squares to be magic boxes. That they want the huge blocks to be magic boxes.
Yes. Terrain piece 1 elements will almost always be true line of sight blocking pieces, i.e. obstructed windows, solid walls, few lines of sight drawable through the physical terrain pieces themselves.
This is terrible.
For terrain piece 2 elements, the opposite is true. The physical elements are themselves quite porous, so while obscuring makes the whole piece block line of sight, this benefit largely dissipates once your units enter the terrain. That's completely ignoring the fact that you can just not touch the terrain.
A unit of Battlesister Zephyrum could sit in any of these boxes and threaten the entire table. Like, that's not okay. I don't know what they're doing.
Because like looking at the terrain, like if these blue things, these large ruins are basically magic boxes, you could set up you can get as close as looks like to be about 6 inches away from the center without exposing yourself to any risk aside from weapons that ignore line of sight or melee that happens to get close enough to you.
Oh, yeah. It's just a choice. Because there's so much fight last now. Like, a character with fight last surrounded by, like, a punchy melee unit inside of one of these buildings is actually unassailable. Like, there's nothing you could do to deal with it. And if that unit is also happens to be mobile, like anything with the Dark Eldar keyword or Sister Zephyrum, White Scars, they're also projecting power onto at least 3 objectives. I don't get it. This is not like, it's fine if you have like 2 of these ruins, but I don't know why you but you can't make board up every window. Like you have like a corner, be like, oh, you can't see into that corner or something. But
right. Like this all being said, so the RTT I played like followed these guidelines where, you know, alternating tables were set up with setup 1 or setup 2. However, the terrain itself didn't actually follow like the terrain piece like guidelines, so a lot of the pieces that are supposed to be close to magic boxes were not, and
well, obviously because they can't. This came out last week. A place can't just like turn around and make this terrain.
No, you're right, they can't, because that's a pretty fast turn. Even if you had 3D printers, they'd be cranking them nonstop to try to make enough terrain. But you can also this is more on the TO than anything else. You can also, you know, like just say that these terrain pieces do X things and you can't see through them, basically, instead of just basically playing it as it lies. But again, that's more of a TO thing than I'm basically trying to say. If you're going to follow these guidelines for terrain, like follow all of the guidelines, not just the layout and the keywords. Like the terrain should be constructed a certain way.
I should disagree. I think that this layout is, generally speaking, okay if the stuff in the middle is not obscuring and the blocks are obscuring, but not just like magic boxes. We had magic boxes in 8th edition, And for the
People
most part,
lost their minds.
didn't like them. Yeah, they were not good. Like they like we played with them a bunch, and we discovered that they created very unhealthy things. Like powerful melee units sitting inside of a magic box just like could project power over multiple objectives, and it was just like not okay. And then it just like way overvalued indirect fire because you can't charge into like a bunch of grotesques with a fight last dude standing next to them. You can't do it, so you just have to kill them with basilisks. And this gave us like our guard parking lot armies, and people were like, "Well, this isn't okay." It's like, well, you got to kill the like 11 grotesques in that bunker somehow. So here's 14 basilisks, I guess. I don't know. Okay, in the 9th edition, where it's even more about just like, can you hold this objective for 2 seconds with, minimum force? It's I don't know what's happening here. I'm very confused because generally speaking, I think GW is an excellent job with 9th edition. And then this terrain is just like, I'm thinking of the armies that I play, and like, this makes my Tau army unplayable. Like it's really bad. Like if my guns can't shoot more than 18 inches, I can't play Tau. I can play Tau against bad armies that I can actually kill them all with my indirect fire. But if I'm killing your entire army with indirect fire, there's like other things happening there. And that's also not like good. And then it makes Sisters, which are like already one of the better armies, just absurd. Like Sisters on this terrain is insane because they're a bunch of MSU super mobile units that can like always trade up because of how punchy their offensive power is. And if they can just hide in buildings all day, then like they're only ever going to get. They only ever trade when they're punching, so they're always going to punch before they go away, because punching back is like impossible unless you're also very mobile.
Right.
All right.
What about terrain layout 1? We've talked a lot about.
Everyone wants to yell at me about my Tau comment.
No.
Oh, okay.
So this is terrain layout 2.
Terrain layout. Terrain
1.
layout 1 is a lot better. Still not great. Depends.
One is better. I'm not in love. All right, so for those of you again just listening, we still have our 4 boxes. This time they are like really in the center of the 4 table quarter. We have our 4 light ruins, or sorry, forests in the actual corners of the table, and then we have our 2 medium ruins like on the like left and right hand side of the table at like a sort of an angle. Not in between any of the boxes. It's better. It's like a lot better. It's not great, but it's better.
Turns out a lot better over god awful is pretty easy to do.
All right, so I'm not like just losing my mind, right? Like, because I feel like I just ranting on 2. Like 2's genuinely terrible, right?
Yes. Oh yes, it is.
Okay, cool.
I played 2 games on it on Saturday. It's not. No, I played 2 games on Saturday, and then I played a game on it yesterday, and it was just bad. It was just bad.
I think it kind of favors Death Guard. Like you kind of want to be punchy, but like, although you're a little too slow to take advantage of it from a mobility standpoint.
Yeah, especially if I'm playing like the long ways, like.
Yeah, gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, your opponent completely gets to decide when engagements happen then.
Yeah, and I don't know, it just didn't feel very dynamic and fun to me.
It doesn't look very dynamic and fun.
Yeah, it was basically just march up the board and see what happens.
It's just a race to the center, right? Because like you can't see each other until you're in the center of the table. Whoever gets there first gets the first punch. So
that's basically what happened. Like so, in my game 2 against Deathwing, that's exactly what happened. He got to the center with a shitload of Deathwing Knights, and then he got to basically punch first.
Deathwing Knights, like the Terminators or the Bikers?
The Terminators.
Okay, they don't shoot, right? Or just like he charged you. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about it. I still think the original Nova standard setup is better than either of these.
Yeah, the L's were sweet because you could hide in an L, but you couldn't hide in an L from every angle. It wasn't a magic box. Like you could walk around the back. Like if you could like walk around the back of it and shoot at it. If you had deep strike things, you could shoot at it. It also was like the L's were like reasonably sized, but if you wanted to be like pressed against the entire L, then you started to really be afraid of people like walking around a corner and shooting at you. So usually you had to like push into one corner, at which point you're not threatening like the entire table. Like there was enough downside on the L's that like they weren't miserable. And also like there were only 2 of them. Like if you were just like, I don't want to be near a bunch of like absurdly line of sight obscuring terrain, you could just like deploy yourself in a different corner.
Right. And then both of these setups, now we have 4 L's basically, except there's 3 sides instead of 2.
They're not L's, they're boxes.
And yeah, and they're boxes. And also the table's smaller now.
Yeah, I don't think there's a play like when in Nova, if you wanted to be 24 inches away from obscuring terrain, you could be. And that might be like a little too far, but like I don't think you could be 10 inches away from obscuring terrain on this table. Maybe you could in like a back corner, but there's nothing there.
Yeah, it's really just like the back corners, the two corners on table setup 2.
If they were just like Nova L's are the right thing to do for 9th edition. I'm not in love with Nova L's in 9th edition, but they're not terrible. There's nothing like horribly wrong with them. This is like Kevin said, table setup 1 is a lot better. The thing that also sort of like really bugs me about so beyond them using the obscuring keyword to completely ruin the game, the other thing that bugs me is that the dense and difficult ground keywords do very interesting things, and they've taken their terrain pieces with those keywords and thrown them in the corner in both of these, and like
you just shoved it in.
I don't know if GW is like seen a game of 9th edition, but like it's not played in the corner of tables. Like models just don't stand there because nothing happens there. Nothing important happens there.
Yeah. Like even on setup 2, where it's, along like the midline of each table edge, still doesn't really do too much because again, like, yeah, you could shoot from like corner to corner and, shoot through dense cover. But again, like there's no reason to. Why would you? There's
also like no space back there, right? You could put like a character back there.
Yeah, you can put like one vehicle there, and that's.
I don't think you can put a vehicle behind those things. You can put a vehicle in it.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, it's dense, and it works.
Yeah, sure. But why?
Also, that's a good point you just brought up. This table 2 setup could also be named "Fuck Your Tanks."
Oh yeah, Knights can't play on any of these table setups, by the way. Like Imperial Knights actually do not function on either of these setups, and like a knight actually cannot walk from one side of the table to the other in setup 2. I don't think there's enough space for its base to like clear some of the buildings. Or it could go all the way around the edge, but like if we're just like I want to play knights at a tournament, like if I'm like I want to bring knights to a tournament, and like I call in like, hey, what table setups are you using? Like we're using the GW ones. I'm like, never mind, I won't be showing up. Click like their bases just don't fit.
Yeah, right. You can maybe get away with it like, on setup 1.
Setup 1, you could, you've extremely limited options for where your knight is going, but you could at least move your knight across the table.
Right.
So I feel like we've kind of talked in circles about the badness. So, there's another reason why it's kind of bad, and it's like exactly what already has happened to Chris. These we've had tournaments that are like, well, this is what GW told us to do. Let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really hoping that I am lucky in that I know my local TO, and I know that they are not doing this because they took a look at it and then laughed at it with me and said this is terrible. And as another local TO, I will not be doing this because my goodness, GW. But yeah, I'm a little concerned that the event that I'm going to is just going to be like, this is what we're doing. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I have 90 attacks turn to fix all my problems because I only have indirect fire.
It might work out for you. It has before.
I have to shoot my actual guns at people. I need to shoot direct guns at people to actually kill them.
Why don't you just retool all of your suits to have fusion blasters?
That doesn't fix any of my problems. Also, I could talk to you a lot about like why my tab list works or doesn't work, but we can say that for the end.
Um, so as much as I find this conversation interesting, and even though I was the one who suggested it, I do feel like we've kind of talked in circles for a little bit. Would you guys mind if I switched it up to a question for you two?
I was hoping to loudly complain about this for like another 20 minutes, but I mean, sure, that's fine. I'm into it.
All right. I want you to mind's eye a situation, okay?
Does it have to do with this terrible terrain?
No.
Can I close all my tabs for this terrible terrain and stop thinking about it?
Yes.
All right, cool. I'm into it. What's the question?
All right. So it's 2 weeks ago. You're going to a tournament and you're bringing AdMech, okay?
I'm a monster.
You've put the Warlord trait where you can pick a Skitarii unit on the battlefield and let it fall back and shoot, okay? And you go up against your round 1 opponent, and your round 1 opponent says, hey, can that unit fall back and shoot? And you think for a second, like, well, there's no strat for that unit, and it's not on their data sheet. And you answer no, okay?
Okay.
Completely
So-
forgetting about your Warlord trait.
Okay.
Legitimately, non-intentional. You've made a rules oopsie. Okay. You get to a situation where it's like turn 3 and you're all of a sudden in melee with that unit and you realize, oh yeah, I have my Warlord trait. And then you remember that you told your opponent, hey, I said I didn't have the ability to fall back and shoot with that unit. What do you do as a person? You're at an ITC event with the ITC rules that we've talked about in the last 2 podcasts.
I mean, if you want to be shitty about it, then like, yeah, you could do your Warlord trait, but then the other person would be able to, rightfully so, call over a judge and be like, hey, I asked him straight up if he could fall back and shoot. He said he couldn't, and now he says he can because he has the Warlord trait. You know, you could very easily cop a yellow card for that.
You should cop a yellow card for that.
You should. If I was the AdMech player, what I would actually do in that situation would be like, oh shit, I forgot to tell you, this guy has a Warlord trait that lets me fall back and shoot. But I know that, you know, he asked me, so I'm just, you know, I'm going to let you know now I can fall back and shoot, but I'm not going to do it like in this situation right here because I know that you weren't expecting that.
For me, I've done this in a tournament where my opponent asked me, oh goodness, what was the rule? It was like right after the new Space Marine FAQ, and I was still playing Iron Hands, and they asked me if I could like jump my protocol back or my doctrine back, and I was like, no, and then it turns out I could, and I was just like, I'm not gonna play with that rule. I turned 3. I realized I did have a thing that let me go back, and I said, hey, just so you know, in case you play against Iron Hands again, they can do this, but I told you I can't, so I'm not going to for this game. And I'm still there where if I've told my opponent no, I can't do a thing, I'm not going to do that thing for the entire game. Because I said I couldn't, and I will tell them. Generally speaking, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about the ITC thing. Before the ITC code of conduct, I just 100% be like, hey, for when you play against this exact army next round, or you know, not, they can do this thing. I will not be doing this thing because I said I can't. And then my question there is then like, do we know the ruling for that for ITC? If I'm just like, I'm not going to do it. Like, did I lie if I said I can't do it and then I never do it? I guess I did, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so do I get yellow carded if I don't do it?
So this is where it kind of comes up to the discretion of the judge. They might come over and they'll look at the situation to determine, was there any harmful intent, yada yada. And if they do the investigation and kind of find out that like, hey, you had no ill intent and you say you're not going to use it for the rest of the game, they're probably not going to give you a yellow card. But that does kind of require you to like bring them in.
Right.
One thing that's like very important to clarify is you should not be just making these decisions by yourself.
Yes. Call a judge. Seriously, call a judge.
Never not call a judge and then pause your clock while you do it.
No, God. call a judge. The judge will pause the clock, if they feel it is necessary, and let them figure it out, because you shouldn't be the person figuring out. Now, I do have one issue with this, which is I think ITC should make a policy of this exact situation, that if I go, I can't do a thing, and then I go, oh crap, I can do the thing, that if I call myself out on it, I should not get yellow carded. If I go, I'm never doing the thing this game because I told you I'm not. And because there's two versions of this, right? There's, can you fall back and shoot? And I go, no. And then turn 3, I realize I can fall back and shoot. And I go, if I call a judge, I'm going to get yellow carded. So I'm just never going to fall back and shoot and not call a judge, because that's silly.
I'll also never tell my opponent, because
I'm never gonna call. And now, because here's the thing, right? If I can just go to the end of the game, and my next game I can go, hey, look, I read my warlord trait. I can fall back and shoot. Tell my opponent, and that's not necessarily a negative experience for my round 1 opponent then, because I said no, I kept my word, right? He didn't get screwed over until he goes to
it's
play.
probably better for him, right? Because you removed a very powerful ability from your army because you made a mistake.
Yeah, until round 2 he goes and plays Admech again, and they do fall back and shoot, and he gets destroyed. And he's like, "Boy, my last round opponent said they couldn't do that."
Well, keep in mind it's a warlord trait, so you might have just. This is the difference where it's like a stratagem where you would always have access to it, and a warlord trait where maybe in theory you just didn't bring it.
Right.
You're a fool for not bringing that warlord trait, Ben.
Right, but all right, let's say it's a stratagem then. All right, do you have a fight last in Admech? And I say no, I don't have a fight last, and then I never use it because I said no, and then next round they get smashed by a fight last stratagem because Admech always have access to it, right? Like, I want this to be ITC policy, because if I shouldn't ever be in a situation where I have to give my opponent a disadvantage in a future round in order to dodge a yellow card, because I'm not giving them a disadvantage in this round, right? I'm giving them an advantage. They asked me a question, I answered incorrectly in my own disfavor. I'm now going to bind myself to that, and they'll never know the difference in this game. And like, no judge could ever be like my opponent's not going to be like, I want my last round opponent yellow carded because he never did this. Like, that's just not going to be a thing that happens.
And then it's also a little bit of he said, she said, because a judge will never be like, well, your last round opponent said that you said this thing incorrectly. You never used the ability.
And then I'm just going to be like, oh, I didn't think I had that stratagem, so I never used it. And like, are you going to yellow card me for a stratagem I didn't use? Like, which is terrible.
That's a slippery slope.
Which is my opinion is this should fall under verbal agreements. If you go, can you fall back and shoot? And I go, no. That's kind of a verbal agreement. I've said no, I can't fall back and shoot. So even if later on I go look at my book and go, look, I can. I've said no. The issue of this, of course, being like verbal agreements are only binding if you have a third person. But like, now we're getting to like, yeah, if I'm just gonna like egregiously lie and be like, I never said no, I said yes. Like, that's a different problem that like is like, people are generally not comic book villains. Like, that doesn't really come up as often. There are comic book villain 40k players, but like, it doesn't really, they're the edge cases and not really worth talking about.
I agree.
So
Agreed.
Now this is different from a situation where it's like my opponent goes, what's the save profile on a broadside? And I go, they have 3 ups. And then halfway right through like turn 3, I look at my data sheets and like, oh, they have 2 ups. And now I'm just going to be like, I do some math in my head and I go, I have enough shield drones left that like, I'm just going to keep taking the 3 ups when it matters, because I can win this game if I don't get yellow carded and I'll lose if I do. Well, that's cheating, because that's no longer like, that's just like full on cheating. Because even though I'm again giving myself a disadvantage, now I'm like doing like, you can't just like subtract 1 from your saving throws because you feel like it, when you can just, well, you do have the option of just like not using the stratagem. So that one gets a bit harder, right?
Yeah.
But in the situation where it's like an active ability that you say you don't have, then like you shouldn't get punished if you don't use it. And I also think that you shouldn't be allowed to use it, because people like, if I something like, I don't know, do you have a fight last? Do you have a can't fall back? People might like, I have literally planned like multiple turns out. Like I'm like 3 turns ahead. My opponent not being able to fall back is important. And then if my opponent will go, surprise, I can't fall back. I'm not going to fall back this turn, but next turn I might. And just be like, I have models in the wrong place now. That's really bad for me. Like, you can still gotcha your opponent multiple turns in the head. which is why I think if you say you can't do something, it's just the whole game. You can't do it. And if you
So
don't know,
I
just say I don't know. Let me check.
so I agree with that. This is where I feel like the ITC thing kind of has like it's missing an in between step. So in Magic they have these things called warnings, and in some ways it kind of felt like yellow cards were supposed to be warnings, but like warnings can be pretty low level, and also they have a huge variety, kind of like yellow cards, but like this feels like this is something that like should probably be tracked, but not necessarily like if you put yourself at a disadvantage, you're choosing not to use something active because you've made that mistake.
Yeah.
But all never getting an advantage for it, then it really shouldn't be a yellow card.
Yeah.
But like,
Should that be tracked even? Like
I think so. I think so. Because
why?
part of the ITC code of conduct is that you are up to date on your rules. You should the theory is you should not have gone to the tournament if you didn't know what your warlord traits did.
Mm.
Okay, that's fair. I think it's probably not worth tracking just because like I can't imagine someone like giving themselves the same disadvantage multiple. Like once you've gone through the entire game not being able to fall back, you just feel like I'm not gonna do that again. And if you do that again, you're only helping your opponent. Like because like I think that's the important note, right? Is like at no point are you making the game harder or worse for your opponent. You're literally going like, I have a rule that is good for me. I'm not going to use it because I said I didn't have it. Full stop. Like it's only upside for your opponent. So
Right.
just like
I actually just thought of an interesting scenario.
Okay.
Let's say, for instance, we kind of in 9th edition they kind of made Titanic models with 18 or more wounds, right?
It's close to the same thing, but not quite. But sure.
Is it only Titanic that get the you can fall back and shoot without penalty?
Yes.
Okay. Fine. Let's say we're playing with a Titanic model. We kind of forgot that was like a base rule of the game, and you asked me, "Hey, can that thing fall back and shoot?" And then that happens. The situation
hang
here.
on. Sorry, who has the Titanic model, me or you?
You have a knight.
All right, and you point and you say, "Can that thing fall back and shoot?" And I say no.
Right.
Okay.
This is a similar situation, but the difference is both players are supposed to know the core rules of the game, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't think of. There's probably other situations that come up like this where that's like a kind of similar. Like let's just say we both forgot a core rule of the game, and then we both later on realize that, or you realize that, like, oh wait a minute, this core rule of the game, we both misremembered it. How would you guys play that out?
I call a judge, ask them. Well, what would you judge? We're both idiots.
I mean, that's really the only option, isn't it?
I guess.
And then do you want me to say if I'm the judge and I get the call, what would I do? Because that's probably a more interesting question. Yeah. Okay, so I walk up to a table. Player A goes, my opponent has a knight, and he told me it couldn't fall back and shoot. Player B goes, we looked at the core rule book and it says they can always fall back and shoot. What do we do? I throw a book at them. No. That's a nightmare, right?
Yeah,
because that's a nightmare because it's. I think I just hold player B to it. I just say you can't fall back and I just shoot this turn. Remember the rules, like for a couple reasons. It's on their data sheet. Like it's actually on the knight data sheet. It's still technically on the knight data sheet. There's actually a rule of knights that they can fall back and shoot. They have it twice because they're Titanic, I guess. But like whatever, it's still there. Also, the core rules are very expansive, and I give players a pass on sections of the core rules that do not impact their army in any way. If someone is playing Tau and they're like, I have literally no idea how the psychic phase works, that's fine. You know all the core rules that matter for your army. It's on your opponent to know how perils work. Like, it's not really on you. You should know. Like, it'll help you, like, if your opponent's, like, shady. But I really wouldn't put it on them to be like, I forgot how perils work. Because that's just, like, not a thing that affects their army. It's a little bit different.
Like a good example of this would be, obviously most people would know the 1/1 6s, but like, let's say you died to the 6s.
Yeah,
and then
you
you're
guys
supposed to explode, and you just forget that. And that would be something I could see someone forgetting. Or better yet, I could see that something that's happening even if you are both playing a psychic army, because to be honest, it doesn't come up that often.
Yeah, psychers don't usually kill themselves with perils, like because you usually like figure out how to protect that psyker once they perils the first time.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like this is different though, right? If they're playing, I don't know, Imperial Guard with a Baneblade, now I'm kind of looking funny. Like you have a Titan in your army, you should like, you know that, like, come on. But I don't know if I change it. God, Baneblades are bad examples too because they have that rule on their data card. Actually, no, their rule's different. They can shoot out of melee because reasons. Anyway, yes, and that's all right. Final answer. In that situation, as a judge, if a player said a thing, I'm holding them to it. Even if the thing, like, if a player said a thing, like a downside about their model that wasn't real, I'm holding them to it because otherwise they're just gotchaing their opponent, and they're gotchaing their opponent through me as the judge, and that's not okay.
Gotcha.
So I think the short version is just like, if your opponent asks you a question and you're not sure, I'm not sure is a fine answer. Just like pick up your book and look it up. And if you're like, oh, I don't want to burn my clock, well, like, now it is on you, right? Like you need to know your rules.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you think that's reasonable, or?
I think so. You should know your own rules, and if you got to burn your clock to review your rules because you forgot an edge case, then like, that should be on you.
Yeah, and
is it possible to know all the rules ever? No, of course not. But if you know all of your I guess boilerplate basic rules, then you should have plenty of time to look up the edge case rules.
And keep in mind, you also always like call the TO over. Like if your opponent asks you a question, you're like, like call the TO. Like they might know. And especially if it's a core rule, like I don't know, you're trying to figure out who holds an objective, and you're like, how does OBSEC work? Is it the number of OBSEC models? Is it once we both have OBSEC, you just start counting bases? Like do monsters count as 5, or is that Age of Sigmar? I don't remember. Like call the TO, they probably know that they could just tell you.
Just to clarify, by the way, once both players have OBSEC, it's total number of models.
And monsters don't count as 5. That is AOS.
Unless it's a Tyranid monster. I'm kidding. I am joking.
I don't remember that rule.
But that would be sweet.
I mean, maybe does this make Carnifexes playable? No.
The number of models equal to their remaining wounds. There we go.
So 1.
No. Okay.
Yeah. That's an interesting set of questions, though, and that is sort of a shortfalling of the ITC documents, because, like I said, I've literally played that exact situation where my opponent's like, "Can you roll back doctrines?" And I'm like, "I can't roll back doctrines." And I was like, I can roll back doctrines, but I did like verbally say I can't, so I'm not going to. And like, at no point did like I assure you, my opponent was like, "I'm happy to know," because this was a very Iron Hands heavy meta. "I'm happy to know that this is true. And I'm also glad that when my opponent said a thing, it's going to be true for this game." Like it was just all upside for my opponent, and I appreciated being able to finish the game without being like, I should probably just concede because I've been cheating. Like no, it was just like we played a reasonable game of 40k, and then we were able to like both move on and have good games later on. And I don't really see a reason why that shouldn't be the same thing in ITZ. This is a pretty significant like edge case though. Like I'm not shocked that like 1.0 of like the rules doc didn't have this in it, because this is like something that doesn't come up on a daily basis.
Yeah.
All right, question for you. Do you think if this is the situation, right? And I'm like, let's say fall back and shoot, right? And I said I couldn't fall back and shoot, but I can. I'd like to. Should I be able to take a yellow card and do it? Like, what's the deal there? What do you guys? I've said my opinion,
you shouldn't. But it's this isn't basketball where you have like fouls to give. You shouldn't be treating it like that.
Okay.
So you haven't gotten a yellow card. It's round 5 of the. Sorry, it's turn 5 of the finals. And if
Right.
you fall back and shoot and kill the unit, you win the tournament. You win the LVO.
Right, but well, keep in mind, I have to. It's probably not turn 5, right? It's probably like turn 2 because I'm going to lose some number of points from that yellow card, right?
Well, no, you could play. You just it was fine. You got to the point that you could do it on, but you realized by turn 5 you needed to.
Okay, sure.
I'm-
I need to because it'll be killing my opponent's last unit. So when they go to their turn, they can't hold objectives. They'll be hold more for me. It's their last always saying we fight. It's this unit's worth 10 points. If I kill it, it's great. Can I take the yellow card to do it? Should I be able to?
No.
What do you guys think? No, Kevin.
The moral thing is no. I actually think if you document as written.
Look, if this is like evil week and you're trying to go full throttle here, and you know that the guidelines say, it's only minus 10 points, and you're currently winning by I don't know, like fucking 20 or 30, whatever. You can pull this off and win.
This is for the game. All right,
This is why the yellow card has points associated with it, right? Like,
isn't there like a clause though that the judge can just be like, nah?
All right, so all right, hang on. Let me reiterate the question or rephrase the question. The document is not perfect. I'm not asking what the document currently says. I'm asking what do you think the document should say? Should it just say like absolutely not, no under any circumstances? Should it say 10 points, go ahead and do it? Like what should the document say?
Red card, ejection. If you are intentionally committing a foul that will put the hobby of Warhammer in disrepute.
Sure. Kevin?
I think the 20-point penalty is the appropriate thing, but you should be allowed to do it. But if you can win with a 20-point penalty and you still need to do this, amazing.
Fair enough. I'm on just no. I don't know, but like my opponent asks, could they do it? I should eject them. If I'm the TO, someone asks to do it, and I get called over to that situation, and I'm like, "Did you say you couldn't do it?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "Then you can't do it." That's my opinion as a TO. This is a complicated situation, though, and I don't. This obviously in complex moral rules questions, there's not always the right answer. So I think any three of those is like.
Well, here's the silly thing.
With me coming in between minus 20 points and boot them, I think any three of our answers could be like reasonable place to land. What's up, Kevin?
Well, here's the real secret. If you're willing to do this, you're probably also willing to tell the judge you didn't say you couldn't.
Right, and that's a different.
That's a different
problem.
issue.
That's a different problem because now I'm the TO. And I have two people going, you said you couldn't fall back, but I can fall back. It says it right here. And then I'm just like, what's the truth? What is reality, really? Like, I don't. That, again, that's like a comic book villain. Like, it doesn't really happen that often. I kind of disagree, too. Because I think it's like it's a very different thing to being like, I said I couldn't. I actually can. I should be penalized, but I'm going to do it. Like, that's. Like, because as a player, like, yeah, I feel like I am getting punished for like my mistake, rather than just being like, I'm going to lie now.
No, what if you said something along this line? I'm 90% sure I can't. Okay.
And look it up.
I would need to look it up. And you actually even say like, I don't think I can, but do you mind checking? You like kind of hand the book over to them, like, and then you later find out that you can. So you've kind of said like you're 90% sure, you haven't locked in that you can.
But handing the book over to your opponent, you're putting the onus on them to learn your army's
to know
rules.
your entire army's. Yeah, no.
That's a non-starter right there.
As a player, I would never let my opponent get away with that. Like if I ask you a rules question and you go shrug, here's Codex. Like I'm looking at it. I'm either looking at it on your time or like handing you the book back and just be like, just tell me, dude. Like that's ridiculous. I'd probably just call the TO. Like.
And pause the clock.
Something's happening there. Like if I ask my opponent a rules question and their answer is shrug, here's my codex, like like I just want a judge to watch my game. I'm like very uncomfortable. There's something happening there. I've never had an opponent do this to me in my life, because that's bizarre. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it is.
I
It is
kind of
weird.
destroyed the premise of your question, but yeah, I think that's an appropriate response to your opponent just being like, I don't know, here's my book, look it up for me. Like, do you not know your rules? Are you hoping I'm gonna miss it? Like, what's happening? Something's happening that's like probably not okay in the context of like a competitive 40K event.
Yeah, either you don't know your rules and I should get a chess clock to ensure that I have the appropriate amount of playing time for my army, or you're trying to pull one over on me, in which case I need a judge over here. Like, it doesn't pass the smell test, basically.
Yeah, which I think we're also not being fair to Kevin because he's trying to like craft a weird situation where there's more ambiguity than like normal.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right, by exploring these edge cases, though, then we can actually like figure out like, you know, what should the appropriate response be? Because an appropriate response for might work for like 99% of things, but then there might be a weird thing, and then you have to figure that out. And either the existing rule set or code of conduct or whatever the fuck we're talking about covers it, or two, you need to come up with some new, you know, addendum or ruling or something like that. And, you know, like then you got to create a new rule, you know. Basically, like it reminds me a lot of like all of these stupid rules that I've encountered while I was in the military, and it was almost always because some dumbass did something that it was an edge case, and you know, like there used to be a rule that near our base you couldn't go down this one certain road. It was determined off limits by the base general, and it was honestly a road to nowhere. But there was a rule about it because there was an edge case of one guy one time went down there and flipped his Jeep.
Okay. All right. So Kevin, this is an excellent question, and I think there's lots of ramifications and answers to it. But I think we've kind of talked it to death at this point. How are you guys feeling about it?
I agree.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to add? Oh, go ahead.
I think it kind of further doubles down the idea that like this sounds weird to say, but in like some regards, perhaps tournaments just shouldn't say you can go to a tournament within like 2 weeks of a book coming out. I know that's like the exciting time, but like maybe it's on the tournament to have to say like, I know it would be interesting. You're excited for your rules, but we need to give it some time for like things to get vetted out and make sure people are actually up to snuff.
Yeah, there's an argument for that. There's an argument for you're always the bottom table. Like, feel free to like play, but that's kind of bad because then the people who are losing are playing against the new hotness all day, and that's also not good. Yeah, there's a strong argument. I mean, GTS don't do it, right? Like, it's only RTTs that allow new books. Like, GTS usually have like a rules cutoff date, and that rules cutoff date is such that like when a new book drops, is if it's before the rules cutoff date, well, then it's had some time to stew before it. And they usually include the FAQ in the book in the event.
Yeah.
And I know a fair number of GGs don't allow un-FAQ'd books in because exactly this. Well, not exactly this, but yeah, different issues. That this is more players not knowing their rules.
Once again, switching topics, but to the FAQ. Do you guys see the fallout to Salamanders with the can't move strat?
No,
the does not move. So they have a strat that you can pick any unit, including a vehicle, and it counts as standing still if it normal moved. Okay. You know what this is really strong with?
Thanks.
Impulsors, because you can move the impulsor forward.
God.
Move the impulsor forward, have the unit come out, and it's allowed to charge because the rule on the impulsor says if this model, because the model is treated as standing still,
guys who got out of a stationary vehicle so they can charge.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Have they FAQ'd this?
No, there's not. We have not gotten the FAQ to the FAQ yet. But I this is like this has been discussed. It came up at an event, and it's like the judges were like, well, this probably isn't the way it's intended, but this is 100% how all these rules are written together. So,
Good Lord. Thank you for actually nothing, GW. Oh, speaking of thank you for nothing, did you guys see the AdMech FAQ?
There's an
Well, yeah,
AdMech FAQ. I did not see
Yeah,
it. Anything
AdMech
interesting?
FAQ. You can't come out of the sky, shoot your flamethrowers, and go back into the sky. That's it. That's the FAQ. Everything else in the book functioning as intended. It's perfect.
So the one broken thing that nobody was actually taking advantage of is the thing I got FAQ'd.
There's a couple other lines of text, but like, there's nothing that like fixes the problems.
well, this did come out today, huh?
Interesting.
Styges 8, that faction that's tearing up the meta, rather than being able to forward deploy all of their units, they can only forward deploy 3 of their units. Again, this doesn't really change anything.
No, it does not.
Well, they
Okay.
clarified the Mars stratagem. It is in fact a total of 6 mortal wounds across any number of targets.
All right, people were already playing it that way, but I'm glad they put it in the FAQ.
Good.
Alrighty, shall we call it there?
So, I
alright.
guess since you brought it up, this is exactly like Jakari, where they didn't do a power level FAQ until later.
Yeah, we'll see it eventually.
And despite it seeming very obvious to us, I think it is correct for them not to do power level FAQs initially, because this is on the Age of Stigmar side, but there was a faction for the Bone Men, the Arsiarch Bone Reapers, that got nerfed because they seemed to be very strong on their initial tournament. Like the individual sub faction got nerfed, and that fact, Bone Reapers on a whole lost their most powerful tool and never recovered. And even with their most powerful tool, they weren't winning tournaments. So it's like,
God, it was just like, this is the best Bone Reaper faction, nerf it, but not like Bone Reapers are a problem, nerf it.
correct.
That's very different though. AdMech's a problem, nerf it.
Right, but with small subsets, like it would be like them nerfing Lucius and finding out that like another faction was actually secretly always going to be the problem, or
but that's fine.
The point still remains. The point still remains. They should not be doing power level FAQs, unintentional power level FAQs. Like very clearly, this the redeploy. They come back into the sky one was a power level FAQ, but it was also not their intention. It wasn't how they wanted the things to work.
I actually disagree with you, because I think if there's like some secret build in the Codex that's better than Lucius, that doesn't mean Lucius doesn't need to get nerfed. Like, we need to nerf, like, Lucius is way beyond the pale in terms of what's in the current meta and needs to get nerfed. If something else in the book is more broken than that, that also needs to get nerfed. Like, both of these things can be true. But I think for most books, it's fine. But like, I don't know, like, there's only been, I think, 3 books that when they dropped, it was just like, this needs to get fixed now. And that was Iron Hands, this book, and Jakari. And they did it with Iron Hands. The first Iron Hands FAQ was just like, they added command points to several things. They limited stratagems. They took away auras from characters, because the book was a problem. And I think AdMech's going to be like a similar issue, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I don't know. When do you think the next AdMech FAQ will come out? Another 4 weeks, maybe?
I think like Jakari, it's been like a month and a half of AdMech Overlords before we see any changes.
Yeah.
Jakari, they waited for the entire game to get a big FAQ, so another 5.5 months, I guess, is my answer.
Talk to you all at Christmas.
Woo!
Well, I'll be robots by then.
Don't worry. The biggest boy orc they're gonna be the broken faction.
Should I just turn my house into a 3D printing Forge World for Skatari now?
Oh God, like maybe like Skatari are I don't know. All right, let's stop talking about depressing things. Let's just stop the podcast. I think we've hit all of our top topics that we really wanted to hit. I certainly enjoyed our discussion. The sort of like ethical rule questions are always a fun one.
Yeah, I feel like we should have had Burns on for that, but
That's fair.
that's all
Try
right.
nab him next time. Alrighty.
Alrighty, guys. So thank you everybody for listening to this week's podcast. I'd like to thank my contributors, Kevin Lieb and Benjamin Rubenstein. This has been episode. Oh, geez, what episode is this? Episode 49. Been doing this for like a damn year now.
Yeah.
Episode 49, standardized terrain layouts and other ethical conundrums. Yeah. Again, we stream live Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, except for today where we started a little bit later because of the holiday. But, you know, we're also on Spotify and iTunes. We're on YouTube as well. Like, subscribe, smash that bell or something.
Ring the bell, smash the like button.
Yes.
Punch it in the face.
Punch it
Know
in.
who's boss.
All right. That gets more violent every time it happens.
Yep. And after you do all of those things, don't roll any ones. See you guys.